You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Friday, the 2nd of February. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, why grown men are crying in the streets about girls being allowed into classrooms. And for the first time, a group of Hollywood insiders have shared exactly how they make A-listers look younger on screen. And it costs millions and millions of dollars. And our first best and worst of the week for the year, which include my partner Brent taking on the matriarchy, Jessie's feeding screw-ups, and why we haven't noticed that Mia's got a new look yet this year. But first,
in case you missed it, I know I had. I read a headline on Mamamia that said, it's 2024 and Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake are still fighting. I was confused by this and I didn't have time to read the story. Holly Wainwright, please enlighten me.
There is beef. You may remember that last year we talked about how Justin Timberlake is on the comeback trail. And he is. He's got a new single. He's, doing shows. And he and Britney have been back at loggerheads ever since Britney's memoir came out last year, where she said a few things about him that he obviously didn't really appreciate, but many of the rest of us have been dying to know. She alleged that rather than the narrative that's always been out there that she cheated on him when they broke up, she said he'd cheated on her all the time. She said that she had a termination that she didn't particularly want, but he did. And since then, there's been this simmering tension. And then Britney seemed to have a change of heart recently because Justin's got a new single out and it's good because he's Justin Timberlake. And Britney posted on her Instagram, she said, I want to apologise for some of the things I wrote about in my book. If I offended any of the people I genuinely care about, I'm deeply sorry. I also wanted to say I'm in love with Justin Timberlake's new song, Selfish. And she went on to say how cute he was in his new clip with Jimmy Fallon and blah, blah, blah. Justin, on the other hand, wasn't feeling so gracious. So when he performed in New York City the other night, he took to the stage and he said this.
I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to absolutely nobody.
If you missed that, he said, I want to take this opportunity to apologise to absolutely fucking nobody.
Oh, he's such a rebel.
And Britney got upset. She came back again. She said, somebody's been talking shit about me. Do you want me to bring it to the court or will you go home crying to your mom like you did last time? I'm not sorry. So as we say, Britney and Justin are throwing down just like it's the noughties all over again.
All we can hope for is another dance-off. Do you remember that story? So when they broke up, they both were at the same club. And on the dance floor, she started dancing with her crew. And then he took to the dance floor and started dancing on the other side with his crew. And it was like West Side Story.
That's the plot of a film. What a brilliant film.
So I'm just hoping maybe at the Grammys we could have another dance-off.
Oh, my God, that would be so heaven. Somebody needs to be working on that behind the scenes right now.
In the last few weeks, schools all over Australia have commenced term 1. But at one private boys' school...
In February. Can I just say?
Look.
February.
Some states were a little bit earlier than others, but New South Wales is taking the piss.
Oh, come on.
Absolutely taking... They think we don't notice that it keeps getting later and that by the time Luna's at school, we're going to start in June and I'm going to have none of that. But at one private boys' school in Stanmore, that's in Sydney, the year began with parents protesting and some were visibly emotional.
Well, I'm an old boy of the school and my son is also an old boy. And the intention was always that I'd have a grandson, but I won't bring him to a co-ed school.
It's all part of this sort of woke, toxic masculinity type palaver.
I'm sorry, but I'm not a co-ed person.
It's a boys' school. It's always been a boys' school, and there's no justification, no explanation, no evidence to support this move.
We are fee-paying parents who have signed our sons up to a boys' school. The silent majority here have not been heard. So that's why people are emotional. It's about consent and it's about choice. And those two things have been taken away from parents in Newington.
So a bit of context about what they were protesting. Newington was founded in 1863 and it was founded as a single-sex school, always has been. But now the plan is to transition to co-ed by 2033, completely co-ed. I think it's 2026 they're going to start taking girls. Parents and alumni of the college, about 20 in total, protested the decision, with one sign reading, "Boys will become second-class citizens in their own school. Co-ed equals less diversity." Some are uncomfortable that going co-ed will break the school's 160-year-old tradition, and men are pointing out that it is boys' schools who are beginning to accept co-ed enrolments, while girls' schools are largely remaining all girls' schools. So Cranbrook, Barker, there's a number of schools, and this is a very kind of Sydney, New South Wales story, but that have decided to go co-ed. You've heard a few of the statements there, and we've spoken over the years about co-education as opposed to single-sex schools. There's lots of different ways of looking at it. We disagree often on it. But Mia, what do you make of the parents' indignation and how angry they are? I think that's what surprised people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So they claim different things. Some of them say we were misled because we signed up to send our boys to a boys' school, and they claim that they're not arguing with the idea of co-education, but basically sort of claiming false advertising, that sort of idea. There are others who can't quite articulate what it is. And when I thought about it, it's sort of clear that what they're worried about is that it's seen as a bad thing for their boys. I mean, obviously, they see it not just as a bad thing for their boys who are at the school and who will, be having girls in their classes and in the playgrounds, but they even see it as a bad thing for them as former students. Somehow it retrospectively diminishing their status as old boys of that school. I thought it's interesting that we never talk about what's to be gained for the boys. It's always seen as a loss for boys. And you could say more broadly about feminism and equality is seen as a loss for men. Not all men feel that way, but that sort of old-fashioned idea that, if we have to have women in the workplace, if women get the vote, at all of these sort of milestones for the rights of women and girls and equality and more gender-neutral spaces, it's seen as a loss for men, and I don't think that's true.
So let's prosecute the idea that it is a loss, because
what do they think it's a loss of?
Well, one thing we can't deny is how passionately they feel. And what I'm noticing, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, but the fact that all male spaces are seen as hypermasculine, toxic masculinity, we see a real problem with that. And all women's spaces are seen as empowering is just an interesting contrast because, for example, at Sydney Uni there were colleges and there was a big thing about 6 years ago about St Paul's, and there were hazing rituals, awful things that the boys were doing. One of the solutions was to make that co-ed.
Because wouldn't you want to go there if you were a young girl?
Well, apparently lots of girls. It's helped, right? But women's colleges are untouchable. So there are women's colleges at Sydney Uni and they say, no, we want girls to thrive in a single-sex environment. If I'm a man, and I don't think they're doing the best job of articulating it, but maybe that's the question. Is there a space in 2024 for all male spaces?
I think that's a really interesting point because I think that another double standard that's often at play that I find really interesting is people say, I love single-sex education for girls and I don't like it for boys, which is a sort of similar thing to what you're talking about, Jessie. And the problem with that is it doesn't add up. And I think we do need to say here that not all male schools are being broken up. And it isn't actually true that in the rush to increase the number of co-ed schools in places like Sydney, it is always boys. In Randwick, in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, for example, the girls' school is going co-ed. And quite a lot of parents are cross about that too, because change is hard. There's a lot of disruption. You made the choices you made, all that stuff. Consent campaigner and advocate Chanel Contos spoke about this in answer to a question in her press club address last year.
Would you like to see the end of all boys' schools, for example?
See, my problem is that I don't particularly believe in single-sex education institutions for men, but I'm very pro-single-sex education institutions for girls, which leaves us with a bit of a mathematical problem. Because, as I said earlier in my speech, I very often speak at co-ed schools where there's often violence within year groups. And I just couldn't think of anything worse than having to sit next to your perpetrator in math and like nothing being done about it.
See, right there, I think is a clue as to why some of the parents of boys are perhaps a bit defensive. That idea of a girl having to sit next to her abuser, this idea that all men are potential abusers and that if it's not for surrounding them with women, they'll be savage and toxic masculinity.
I think if you go to it, like we were just talking about the Sydney Uni example, it has been seen as a solution. You have a hyper-masculine, problematic culture and you go, we'll just bring the women in. And is that placing women as moral arbiters, as the moral police of the boys around them? And it's like...
It's not about moral arbiters. I've been a really passionate defender of co-ed education. We've talked about it a lot on this show because I genuinely believe very deep in my heart that it's one of the only ways to break down a lot of the issues that we have between genders is for everybody to realise how similar we are, how much in common we have. But the thing is that although places like Sydney have a really, really high number of single-sex schools, I think you said, Jessie, it's one of the highest in the world.
Yep.
Overall in Australia, there aren't very many people who go to single-sex schools. Like statistically, it's small. It feels big and it feels like a really big issue because for a whole number of reasons that would probably make a whole other podcast, culturally, the influence of the people who go to those schools, because they're very often either religious or they are private and prestigious, means that they have a lot of influence on our culture. You know, a lot of business leaders, a lot of politicians, a lot of prime ministers will have gone through those kind of educations. So it feels like they have a really big cultural impact when actually in a day-to-day world, most Australians go to co-ed schools, right? So it clearly isn't the silver bullet, the cure. You know how I'm saying I think it helps a lot. You know, our domestic violence statistics are horrendous. Statistics actually say that sexual harassment in schools is high, and it's as high among boys as it is among girls, which is really interesting too, right? So I think it's a thorny issue that we need to be less obsessed with, is my general takeaway from it. Because I don't think it's about sending women in as moral arbiters. I think it's about if we take away some of these spaces that are hyper-masculine and eject females into them. And I mean, that makes it sound terribly like a controlled experiment. But the whole idea is more to break down barriers than it is that the women should be there to say, stop doing that, put that down, don't have that. I don't think that's the idea.
There's also been the debunked research, and one of the men that was interviewed said, basically the research is still out on this, and he's actually right. So I've definitely cited this research before, which is that girls do better in single sex, boys do better in co-ed. Actually, when you listen to a lot of the experts, and now there's longer term studies and they've taken into account things like funding and what area those schools are in, that's not the case. So I can see how it might feel like an experiment. I mean, I would say that, as you've often said, Holly, the world is co-ed, preparing them for the world, but we don't know if this is going to be better for boys or not. So
but what's the measure of doing better? Like doing academically better, right? But what about reducing the risk of sexual assault and domestic violence by having more boys have friendships with girls? And what about the same with girls? What about people who've gone to girls' schools can say that they can be a hotbed of mean girl behaviour and that when there are boys around, the girls behave better to one another as well.
But then on the other hand, it's like there's a lot of data to suggest that boys and girls learn a bit differently. They might want to sit and focus on one thing for a longer period of time, whereas boys operate better in a blah environment.
But don't people learn differently?
Yes. Yeah, exactly right.
Freedman, they do. I think people learn differently. I mean, I think it's interesting. People are going to be resistant to change. And what we see on display with that man who was crying, and I know there's been a lot of mocking of him, which I think is cruel, just is cruel to be mocking a man crying on the internet. That speaks to a very deep cultural connection that a certain section of society has to its school. And I culturally do not relate to that even a little bit. In my world, school is just a place that you went to learn, a place where you went to hang out with your friends, a place that was supposed to teach you about the world. But I don't understand that old boy, old girl stuff. But it's obviously very prevalent in this particular section of the community.
That man graduated when he was in the 1970s. I think it's also grieving a different world.
And I'm very interested in the idea of a grown person taking a day off work, presumably, to make a sign and stand in front of a school to protest the admission of girls. Like, maybe have a think about how that comes across, sir.
I do have some curiosity about where it's come from, though. Like, and I'm not saying this about this particular man, but is there a cohort of men where the last time they felt like they belonged to something was when they graduated year 12? Yeah. That's sad.
Yeah, definitely some truth in that.
There's a big story that broke right at the end of last year that I've been desperate to talk about on the show. The Hollywood Reporter published an investigation about the A-list's most guarded beauty secret. It's not a cream and it's not even surgery. It is that...
Although it is that too.
Although it is that too.
It's all of those things and this.
Because that's not enough, the secret that is most guarded in Hollywood is that certain actors, the ones with the most power in Hollywood, and most usually women, although also men, have it written into their contracts now that every frame of the TV or movie in which they appear will be retouched to make them look younger and flawless. Every frame. So we've long known about, the use of Photoshop on still images like magazine covers and movie posters. And now, of course, civilians do it too on social media with, use of filters and apps like Facetune. And all of these things can make faces and bodies look completely altered from reality. But until now, the use of this similar technology in the movies and TV shows that we're watching has not been widely reported, and I don't think it's something that we've been consciously aware of. Certainly, I haven't been consciously aware of it until a year or so ago when I was talking to some people about it. And that's because everybody involved has to sign NDAs. So in this Hollywood Reporter story, the sources that they had who are either across this retouching or are actually doing the retouching themselves were all anonymous. And they say that it can cost as much as 6 figures per shot. So 6 figures is like $100,000 American. And it means that you can remove bags under your eyes, hide acne scars, of course, things like that. But you can also just be de-aged. It's known as digital makeup, but I think that's really misleading because it's actually a completely altered reality that's subconsciously affecting the beauty standards that we impose on ourselves every time we watch a show where a woman in her 50s looks like she's 23. Has anyone watched the morning show?
I haven't watched it.
I had to stop watching it for this exact reason.
So as someone who hasn't watched that, I was reading this going, I need an example. Obviously, we do not have examples that we can verify because it's all NDAs. But what are some telltale signs that you're watching something where it's been digitally altered potentially?
You know what's interesting about the morning show as this example, Mia, right? You know how you were saying that you'd stopped watching it in this most recent series, season 3, because you found this so distracting. And I found that fascinating because I realised that I liked this season more because of this, which is terrible. I'll explain why, Jessie, right? So the 2 leads on the morning show are Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. A-listers at the absolute top of their game. And as we've already said, we cannot say for sure that that is happening. But in this impeccably sourced Hollywood Reporter piece, and it's worth noting the Hollywood Reporter isn't like a trashy magazine. It's sort of the industry Bible. And a lot of A-listers collaborate with them. They talk about, literally, they say, a high prestige streaming show with A-list actresses in it. So we'll just leave that there. So Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon in this show, they both play TV anchors. Reese Witherspoon in particular, in the first season and the second season, she's supposed to be a bit of a scrappy up-and-comer, and Jennifer Aniston is the sort of morning TV queen who's being challenged. And one of the things that used to distract me a lot about that show, and I'm not proud of saying this, is that Reese looked too old for that part. She didn't look too old, full stop. She looks amazing, and looking old is a whole other thing. But like, she looked like a woman in her late 40s, not like a early 30s, maybe late 20s TV reporter from the burbs.
Who was just getting started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I used to find that really distracting. And when I watched this season, I didn't think about this until Mia pointed it out to me. But like, I didn't think about that even once because they both look absolutely incredible. And I know that's a subjective phrase. They always look incredible. But as in, sometimes you see a celebrity in a still image and they look a certain way on the cover of a magazine. But then when you see them moving around on a movie, you can see that they are indeed human. There are crepey lines in their neck. There are a few crow's, what do we call
Crow's
those?
feet.
Yeah, if you've
crow's
watched
feet.
Naiad, for example.
There's some texture to their skin that just inevitably comes.
Well, they look like humans.
Yeah, they look like humans. And you kind of go, I see the difference now between what you're presenting me when you're in control, what's presented when you're not. That had been erased in this season of the morning show. They'd look always like the lineless, flawless people.
Cyborgs, but not everyone. And that's what's interesting because it's so expensive. Like the budgets for this can be up to $500,000 for one person. American. So that's like blows out the budget massively. So it's only the stars with enormous power. You don't just get this, for the laughs. It has to be written in your contract and you have to be powerful enough for the studio to accept that and to say, okay, well, we want you so much, we will agree to that. It's like on your rider. But they don't do it for everybody. So what is also distracting in the morning show is that you can see who's got it and who hasn't. And Jennifer Aniston's character is meant to be a woman of like Lisa Wilkinson or Tracy Grimshaw's age, or possibly a little bit younger. Those women are in their, I think, early 60s or perhaps a little bit younger. And she looks like she's 23. And it's so distracting. She also doesn't look like she's a 23-year-old human.
Does
she
it
just
look
looks
filtered.
Yes.
I heard it described as it sort of started with, Britney Spears film clips from the 90s, early 2000s or whatever, and she just looked a bit plastic.
Yeah.
And it looked like there was a filter over her face. Does it look like that?
It depends how well it's done. And just reading from this Hollywood Reporter story, this guy who is one of the sources who does it, he says sometimes it's in an actor's contract that they're going to get a cosmetic pass, adding that at other times the actor would specify in their contract with the studio who would be doing their work for them. Particularly when they are requested in an A-lister's contract, these digital artists are often working closely with a long-time trusted member of the star's team, such as a traditional makeup artist or an assistant. They'll be the ones ultimately approving things, or the talent themselves might approve things. And they say sometimes the A-list actor will sit in for the review and give notes. So what will happen is that they'll send in their makeup artist and their makeup artist will say, no, get rid of that line. There's a shadow there. Get rid of that freckle. And I just think you say, oh, well, who, what? We know Photoshop, whatever. We do. I think we now have an understanding, although it's still, there's a difference between what you see and what you logically know, that still images are photoshopped and altered and celebrities will always do this and they've had surgery, et cetera, et cetera. But when you are watching a TV drama, when some of the people look, Hugh Grant famously said, he was talking about a movie that he was in with an actress who was pretty much the same age as him. And he said, I look like a scrotum next to this person because he doesn't have it in his contract. Not every actress wants it. That's the other thing.
Yeah. I remember reading about Glee. They used to do a pimple check and they'd go through and anyone who had a pimple, you remove that. There was something where they'd filmed it and someone had a crumb in their beard for the entire thing. And it's like, oh, okay, let's get rid of that. And then there are two things that happen. There's sort of the Benjamin Button. There's an actor who wants to play a younger version of himself. Apparently this happened in a recent...
the plot.
Indiana
the plot
Jones
requires it.
Yeah.
So Pirates of the Caribbean, which I think there are like 75 now and I haven't watched them lately, but apparently one of the latest, Johnny Depp, required that. So they were able, with images of Johnny Depp from when he was 30, they were able to create a young version.
I feel like that's so very different to when they do it to women, right?
So that's one stream and that's sort of what the technology has been used for
Special
years
effects.
and years, almost special effects.
Yeah.
But then I read that 85% of movies are using some form of de-aging. And if you know anything about movies, it's like that's not, Benjamin Button is one movie. It's not necessarily required. And so apparently it's also plastic surgeons sitting there and going, well, if you do this to their face. And the other one I heard actually was having people go, I got too much Botox done. I need you to actually put some expression back in my forehead.
Yes.
And it does say in this Hollywood Reporter article that the actors who actually have in their contracts, you're not allowed to digitally retouch me, because sometimes it'll be the studio who wants to retouch you and you're like, no, I like my crow's feet. But here's my question about all this, because it's really interesting to know that happens and it's power for us to, instead of wondering why Jennifer Aniston or whoever looks like that, we can be assured that she doesn't. But who are we mad at? Because it reminds me of that storyline in Strife, TV show about Mamamia, the episode that you and Claire wrote, Jessie, where Kylie Minogue playing not Kylie Minogue but somebody else, is retouched by a magazine, and the website exposes the retouching. And then the Kylie Minogue character says, well, what do you want me to do? I'm playing in this space.
As if things for women our age aren't hard enough. Look, I'd love to be allowed to just be. But unfortunately, that's a fantasy. Unlike my mortgage, which is very real.
As individual actors in a youth-obsessed world, because really the blame comes all the way back to why are we so unprepared to want to see women who have wrinkles on screen? In a youth-obsessed world, I have to keep working. I want to keep working. I'm competing with Zendaya and all these beautiful young lineless beasties. How am I to blame for the fact that if there's a tool there that will help me do that, I'm going to use it? Like, even in a very tiny way, I relate to it. You know, we often talk about vanity, and I'll say, we talked about it the other day on the show, I don't want you to show my saggy chin. It makes me look old. And I'm not a Hollywood A-lister, but I will choose to represent myself in a way that makes me seem younger and more relevant. So my question is, who are we mad at?
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yes.
Can we also blame HD cameras? Because I wonder if the quality got too good. So if you look back at a TV show made 15 years ago, there's a lovely blur. And now
There's
it's
not just a blur. I was watching Muriel's Wedding with my kids a few years ago, and you should see people's teeth back then. Like, they were just regular teeth, and people had regular looking faces and regular looking bodies, and now they don't. Like, if you look at a movie that was made even in the 90s or the early 2000s, the whole aesthetic, as Holly would say, of what a person, particularly a woman, should look like has changed, and that's not good for any of us.
I went and saw Poor Things recently at the movies, and so that was on a big screen too. Like, you can see every pore on Emma Stone's face. Like, I can see how it would be confronting.
But she's in her early 30s, and I agree with you. So I think that she's in her early 30s and at the height of her power, whereas the women that we're talking about are in their 50s. And it's not that, I don't know, I'm sure there are younger women that get it done too, but it's this idea of, and this is what I always push back on, the women who are asked about aging and what's it like being in your 50s, and they're like, I've never felt so beautiful, I've never felt so sexy, while they take all their clothes off and use all that enhancement. It's like, well, don't airbrush your face, put some clothes on, and then tell me how confident you feel in your body.
What do you want them to say, though? I hate my face and I wish I looked like I did when I was 25? Like, is that really?
I do, because that's what the rest of us are struggling with. Not that we hate our face, but the rest of us are struggling with that. And then you see a picture of an A-list celebrity who's your age or older who looks 23 and says how comfortable they are. I've never been more comfortable in my skin in my 50s.
I have to challenge that a tiny bit, Mia, because the thing is I don't think it's them individually. I remember you saying to me when we were watching the most recent Sex and the City, I find it confronting to see that they've aged, right? Is the market happy to pay money or pay subscription fees or buy tickets to see stories about people who look older than 30? You've got to go all the way back to that, because if we're demanding that everybody on our screen is beautiful, lineless, young, it's on us. Do we want to see stories with women who look like women?
I think you're now blaming the player, because sometimes I'll have this conversation with a man who'll say, but it's not men who want this, it's women, not understanding that beauty standards are not imposed by individual men. They're imposed by a society that demands women look a certain way to be considered valuable.
Agreed. But I think we should challenge ourselves and each other when we are going, she looks so old now. You know what I mean?
Do you know why she looks so old? Because every other woman of that age that we've seen has this digital makeup and looks 23. So you're right. It's not confronting seeing an actual woman who looks like they're in their 50s, but seeing a woman on a TV show or a movie, this is why it's confronting.
Mamamia out loud! You look flawless.
If you want to make Out Loud part of your routine 5 days a week, we release segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays just for Mamamia subscribers. To get full access, follow the link in the show notes, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers.
It's best Best and worst of the week time. It's our first for the year, and I'm going to go first. Now, I've got a story about my mum. It's a little bit shocking, a little bit sweary. You ready?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is my worst of the week. Watching television with my boomer parents who are visiting, right? Now, they're wonderful. I'm not criticising them in any way, but they don't really understand modern culture, and not even that modern. So when we were on holiday this week, we were watching the tennis, and every single ad break in the tennis was an ad for MAFS, right? Because MAFS, Married at First Sight, was coming back after the tennis, when the tennis finishes. And so every ad break, there'd be an ad for MAFS that would show you the premise of MAFS, these people getting married, whatever. And my mum could not get her head around it. So this is a show where people who don't know each other meet each other for the first time and I'm like, yes, Mum, that's the premise of the show. Well, that's ridiculous. Yes, Mum, it is. We wouldn't have a show like that in England. Yes, Mum, you do.
So many.
Actually, the Australian one has gone absolutely off in your country.
Exactly.
I'm surprised.
And also Love Island's possibly worse.
And she's like, who would want to watch that? It's the most popular show on television, Mum. So my mum finally cracks it on like the 14th ad for MAFS, and she just said, I'm sorry, Holly, but I cannot accept that the most popular show on Australian television is all about whether or not these two people are going to fuck on their wedding night.
I can't believe she got it so quickly. She really nailed it.
And I was like, Mum, and I'm like looking around at the children here, looking around.
That's so
and she's like,
good.
well, that's what it's about, isn't it? And me and Brent are going, well, I think it's about like drama and are they compatible? And
That is so true.
Oh, my goodness. And tell me after all of that, when the tennis was over, she was like, well, we putting it on? She would love it.
She didn't, but I so should make her sit through an episode.
She watched Saltburn with your parents?
I did. But you see, it's not that my mum's not a prude, as evidenced by the story, but she cannot understand reality television. And we did watch Saltburn, and Matilda, who's seen all the Saltburn clips on TikTok, God help me, that's another story, was so mortified by the idea of that. It was great.
There's a whole TikTok thing about people filming themselves watching Saltburn with their parents. I did the opposite thing on holidays. I watched it with my teenage son.
He wanted to die. I was also sitting there.
Jesse was there too.
And there was one scene that began and he was like, this isn't that bad. And I was like, you just wait. He was laying on a grave and then it
got worse. It got so much worse. Out Louders, we are going to do a whole subscriber episode talking about Saltburn because there is a lot to unpack about that show. That'll be next week.
Is.
Holly, what's your best?
So my best, speaking about masculinity as we were earlier, my partner, Brent. So this has trumped even the fact that this week I finally sent in my book manuscript, which is a moment of mass relief.
Congratulations.
And euphoria and nerves.
For all of us.
For all of you who've had to put up with me. This is even better than that. So where we live, which is, 2 hours south of Sydney, a town near us has a show. Now, if anyone who lives regionally or rurally knows that the show is a big deal, right? So the show's kind of like a fair, but it's also a rural event where people bring their cattle and their animals, and there'll be wood chopping and there'll be horse riding and there'll be all this stuff. But there'll also be rides and, side shows and all that. Anyway, all the local people enter their stuff. And this
What are you entering? Your veggies?
Well,
Don't.
I'm so not.
Is this a vegetable
People kept
story?
saying to me, enter some veggies. And I was like, all my veggies are too ugly for this show. We will work on the beauty of my vegetables for next year. Brent has entered his scones. Brent makes scones.
I love scones.
And he has entered his scones in the show. And the reason this is a big deal, and anyone who's ever lived rurally will know this, is the scone competition at a regional show, a country show, is intense.
That's a lot of swagger and confidence to enter your scones.
Yeah, we are talking CWA members who have been working out the best scone recipe for generations. There are rules about presentation. There are rules about how they can't touch each other in the pan. They have to look like this, they have to look like that. Brent makes the most basic scones in the world, which I think are cheat scones with lemonade and cream and stuff in them. They taste like heaven. Oh. He's just gone, I'm challenging the matriarchy. I think I'm the only male in the scone contest. We're going in. And I just looked at him and I thought, I've never loved you more, not least because it meant we had to eat scones every day for a week. While
Can
we
you
did all
bring
the
some in
practice
next
batches.
week? I love that he's bringing co-education to the CWA scone contest.
He's like, women have had this for too long.
It's true.
They need a man to come along, break it up.
Yeah.
Toxic culture.
Or he's mansplaining scones to a whole generation of women. Either way, it could go badly. I'll report back, but I'm here for it.
My worst is also food related. I've just stuffed solids. I've stuffed it up.
How could you stuff solids?
So Luna, my 7 month, she's 7 months today. She started solids a bit early because of her. I've spoken about how she's just had a few issues putting on weight. So already there's a bit of pressure because it was like, let's get calories into her, right? Now, I don't understand food. I don't get it.
What do you mean
It doesn't come naturally. I'm like, Luna, do you want a piece of Vegemite toast and some coffee? Like, I don't know what to offer her.
A chicken sandwich.
Yeah, do you want my chicken sandwich? And everyone's like, just give us a legume.
Oh,
Why don't you
crikey.
give her a little bowl of lentils and chickpeas? How about some yams? I thought yam was fish. And I was going, who feeds a 6 yam? Apparently it's an American word for sweet potato.
It is, darling.
Which she does love.
And then they think you should do all the like food that you eat. So I go and buy a mango and put a mango in front of her. And she puts it on her head and then on the floor. And I'm like, that mango was $17. How is one meant to not feel pressure?
Luna, Cosy lives.
Luna, please put some mango in your mouth. Anyway, and so then she's clearly developed this preference for fruit, right? She loves her apples. And I was like, well, I guess I just keep giving her apples.
But
No.
apple mush, to be clear. She's not like
Oh,
just tucking into an apple that Jessie just puts on the table.
No, although I think maybe I should have been doing that. No, she's just been having like soft apple. And I spoke to a friend's mum who's an absolute expert this week, and she was just like, textures, different tastes. I think I've given her a bit of a sweet tooth, and I think I've ruined her for life. I think she's going to be the 7-year-old who's just like, will only drink apple juice. Anyway, I think I've got to start eating legumes.
You're at that phase, I remember, of parenting where everything in your house just has this fine coating of orange mush.
Yes,
Like
yes.
you don't really know what it is, but
up
it's
her
just
nose, between her toes. It's just disgusting.
I looked at myself in the mirror after I was looking after Luna last week, and I'm like, tell me you've been looking after a baby without telling me. I had puree all over my face, in my hair. I had some in my own ear. And, of course, all over my
Yesterday
clothes.
I watched her. I gave her some sweet potato, which was a bit more textured. Anyway, she clearly didn't like it because she regurgitated it all onto her tray and then played with it. And I was like, I didn't sign up for this.
There we go.
Okay, so that's my worst. My best.
Can you identify a legume just quickly?
Is it a bean?
Yeah.
Like what kind of a
Beans,
bean?
lentils, pulses.
I have never eaten a legume, maybe by accident. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know where I'd find it in the shop.
You've got to soak them. It's hell.
Oh, fuck me. Okay. My best is being an auntie. I haven't been able to talk about this properly yet because Claire, of course, had Matilda at the end of last year, and I was on the show and I knew, but I didn't want to announce it because I think, you know, that would become a dilemma on this year's show.
Because she hadn't announced it
'Cause
yet.
she hadn't
On our
announced
last
it.
show of the year, Claire had the baby but not announced it.
Yeah. But she is now 6 weeks old. She's smiling. She is heaven. Like the experience of being an auntie.
How does it feel different?
Oh, it
Being
is
so close together.
different. It's so different. Like, you know, when it's your own child, it's like there is this layer of anxiety and concern and mental load and has she eaten and has she this and that and stress. And when you're an auntie, you just get the joy. And like to go and grab Matilda and like steal her and give her a cuddle. Oh, I just love it. I've never understood the auntie thing until now. So many out louders are aunties and they're like, it's my favourite job.
It's great.
Claire said that sometimes when you two will see each other with your kids, you'll walk in and you won't even say anything. You'll just go and pick up Matilda and she'll just go and grab Luna.
And we just love it so much. Oh, my God.
What
it's
a
just
special,
heaven.
That's exactly how being a
Heaven.
grandmother feels.
And you know how we've spoken before about seasons and like what to do when you're not.
This is a precious one.
I'm in this season and every single day I'm going, bloody hell, I love this season. And I know therell be other seasons I hate, but I think right now I'm going, this is 10 out of 10 season.
I love that.
That's so
Mia,
lovely.
what is your worst?
My worst is not a big deal, but I think it's one that a lot of outlouders will relate to. By the time I look in the mirror at the end of my holidays, my aim is to look relaxed, look like my holiday face, which is always relaxed in a way that I can't even articulate or point to any particular feature. That's good. And I did achieve that at the end of these holidays. And I still do look a little bit relaxed even at the end of the first week. But part of that relaxation and part of that holiday face is chronic pigmentation. which is getting worse. And interestingly, it used to be bad on my forehead. I used to look like someone had sort of thrown an espresso on my forehead by the end of summer, but now it's moved to my cheeks. I feel like it could be a pigmentation rosacea combination, which is quite a thing that happens in menopause. Have you had pregnancy pigmentation?
Yeah, I got some on my cheek that I assumed would go away when I had a baby and it did not. But I have a question about pigmentation because you are one of the most sun conscious. You are wearing sunscreen to bed, right? Like you are so obsessed with sunscreen. So all summer you've been wearing sunscreen. Yeah. How come you would still get pigmentation?
Because I've been outdoors a lot. Like unless you wear, a bag over your head, which is I don't recommend, you'll still get sun damage. Like just by walking around in the world, you will get sun damage. You can't completely prevent it. Plus, I put it on in the morning. Do I reapply it? Almost never.
Right.
So not one time have I lay in the sun.
No.
Not one time have I gone to the beach in that way or anything like that. I'm always wearing a hat. I'm always wearing sunscreen. I'm always wearing glasses. But during the year, I'm indoors 90% of the time. But over the holiday break, I want to be outdoors as much as I can. So you just get sun damage. I don't hate it. My best is that I'm really enjoying having a new look.
I didn't notice that you had a new look.
Can we guess what it is, Holly? Because
I thought she had a new look at the end of last year. I thought at the end of last year she'd gone slightly androgynous businesswoman look.
Okay, right now I think she's still kind of doing that. She's wearing a lot of shirts lately. That's all I've noticed.
It's a continuation of that, Holly. You're not wrong. I'm going quite neutral. I don't want to wear bright colours. Sequins are dead to me at the moment. Nothing sparkly. I don't want to wear fluoro. I don't want to wear anything tricky. I don't want to wear prints.
What's
I really
happened?
don't.
Are you okay?
I don't want to wear anything feminine. The androgynous is right, but also just minimalist, not quiet luxury because that's not my jam at all. But I'm liking sort of more muted colours. I've got a clothes rack in my room because I've got, as you imagine, quite a lot of clothes. My favourite thing to do, and it really helps, is that thing I've got nothing to wear just means I've got nothing for who I want to be today. So it always helps if you've got less to choose from. So if you've got your whole wardrobe that's visible to you all the time, not everyone's got space for a clothes rack, but even if you just put some of your clothes in one section, you wear 10% of your wardrobe 90% of the time, right? But if you have to pick that 10% out of your entire wardrobe every time you open the cupboard and get dressed, that's a lot of mental load. So what I'm enjoying is there are some things that I've bought recently, things that I want to wear, things that I've owned for a long time that are right for the aesthetic that I like at the moment. I've sort of put them all on a rack and I'll take a picture and I'll show you. I'll post it somewhere for Outlouders, probably in the newsletter. And it's a very neutral palette. I'm teaching you two about colour palettes.
Wow.
It's a very neutral palette. You would be shocked. I'm wanting to wear black. I know. Don't panic.
I will be really scared when you come into the office.
Be alert and also alarmed because every time I do that, people are like, what's wrong?
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Who
You're turning
died?
into me. You're morphing into me.
Yeah.
Jessie, you've got a recommendation.
I do. I asked over the break for recommendations about like a to-do list app, and I had a very specific request. I needed literally just a to-do list. Don't do anything tricky. I'm definitely not bloody paying for it. And I need it on my phone and I need it on my laptop open all the time. Because my issue was I had this to-do list on my laptop, but every time something would happen, like Mia, you'll say at the end of this, can you email blah? I have to write down everything. I will forget and I won't do it. So I have to write down everything.
Same.
So I would have to send myself a message to put it on my to-do list. And Luca caught me one night and he was so horrified that I went, we need a new process.
Oh, wow.
So I got this recommendation for an app called Todoist, and it's all one word. So it's to do IEST, free. And I've got it up on my phone now and I will just do it as a dot point. If someone says next Tuesday, I need you to do blah, I can have a list for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. And it's synced up with my laptop. So as soon as I do it, I can just press it off. Really, really simple. It's like a written to-do list, but just on there. And I have been a lot more
really
organised.
like that.
Because I don't know how people do things anymore. There are too many things.
And too many places for the
yes,
things.
it's like I'll put it in your calendar and I'm like, I'm not putting it in my calendar.
No.
It's like a weird little, it's like peanut butter is one of my things. You know what I mean? It's just little things that I'll forget.
I use Trello. Is it like Trello? Did you try Trello?
That was the other recommendation.
Isn't Trello like a project management system?
Well,
Like
I
for a
just use it as
business?
a to-do list, and I've got like different boards. So I've got like a work to-do list and a personal to-do list and a book to-do list. But you know how at the beginning of every year when you're feeling overwhelmed about how you're going to be different this year, very often you're dissatisfied with whatever system you've got. So I'm now like Todoist. That sounds better.
I think I'm going to do that.
Yeah, it's really good. I haven't checked yet, but I would love it to be able to assign tasks to others.
I was going to say, can you share it in the same way?
I think I can share it. I think I've got to double
Like,
check.
can I send something to your Todoist?
Just get your hands off my Todoist.
Yeah,
That's what
very
I'd say to
true.
you, Mia.
Yeah, no, I'm more thinking in in
Can you
families.
imagine if Mia had access to our Todoist?
Do not.
She'd put 55 things in everyone's Todoist, and I'd be like, "You've ruined the app."
No, I'm not talking about with you two, but I mean, like in a family, it's quite nice if, we all use a shopping app for our groceries and everyone just has access to it and puts things on the same list in the same cart.
I'm going to try and
Okay, Todoist.
Todoist.
Downloading it now. Now, I bet you're sitting there thinking, I wish this show wasn't over. I wish there was more.
Oh my God, we often
them.
hear
You know
that.
what? I don't know that's true after this.
If anyone is even still listening at all, and you are as riveted as we hope that you are, we've got more that you can get in your ears. In yesterday's subscriber episode, we had part 2 of the topics that we have been desperate to talk about over our summer break. And one of them was J-Lo's, not her video for her song, but the trailer for, I think it's a movie. It's very unclear. But Holly and Jessie hadn't seen it, so I made them watch it while we were recording, and then we unpacked it.
And I was desperate to talk about
Yes.
Abby Chatfield's butt plug.
Oh, Year of the Butt
line.
Plug. Yep.
Year of the butt plug. I had lots to say. We talked all about that. I just think.
Year of the Butt, and also Pamela Anderson's new skincare line. We had to talk about whether the whole of last year and her no makeup thing was just a tease, like a big marketing ploy.
Yes.
We will put a link to that episode in the show notes. It's a cracker.
Thank you for listening to us on our first week back for 2024. We are Australia's #1 news and pop culture show, and this episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman, with audio production from Leah Porges, and we will be back with you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There's a link in the episode description.